Okay, so hang on one second. Taking a deep breath. Hi, everyone. I'm Rachel Lang, the Outreach Director for NCGR, and I am here today with Lynn Bell. Hi, Lynn.
Hi, Rachel.
Good to see you.
It's good to see you too.
And today we are going to be talking about a topic that you're speaking about at the New England Astrology Conference, which is coming up next weekend.
Right, very exciting. Their first Zoom conference.
Yes, and I just spoke with David Perloff, the president of the chapter of the Boston chapter, and he's hoping that this is going to be an annual event. So, I'm expecting many more of these kinds of events to happen in the future with this group. And it's such an incredible group of speakers and topics. And I really, your topic speaks to me. It speaks right to my heart, because this is a language that I use in my practice. This is a concept that I'm really familiar with and working with, and that is talking about the body psyche, so the archetypes of the body and the way the body speaks. So could you tell us a little bit about your topic and how you came to it?
Well, the topic is body and psyche, the archetypal language of planets and symptoms. And it's not a medical astrology. It really is, how do we think about what a person's experiencing their body, which is a really important part of all our being, of course, and their chart, without necessarily going into the kind of exquisite detail that some of my colleagues like Lee Lehman or Judith Hill, who are medical astrologers, would do. I'm really interested in using the symptom as a way to speaking to a deeper level of the person, right? And so some symptoms seem, many years ago, I did a psychoanalysis, and my analyst said to me, she said, well, you have a symptom when your unconscious can't speak to you in any other way. And I love that. That's, I think, there are lots of things from that period I might not pay attention to, but that's one I really like. And especially as you've been on the planet longer, you understand that the body does carry certain things. And so we were talking about this, that in my practice, I used to sometimes notice that I would feel physical symptoms with people, or someone might mention something, and then I'd use it to elaborate a whole large piece of their chart. Like someone will say, I spoke to someone the other day who had a capsule, the gel capsule in their eye tore. And it's something that it can happen as you get older, but it actually means the cushion between the eye and the outside world loses some of its comfort. Okay, so if I'm going to talk about a symptom like that, I'm going to talk about discomfort, and particularly work with the person on how they're seeing things and where they're looking, and a need to stop and look in a different way, perhaps. And that's a very, very, it's not a serious symptom. It can be treated relatively simply. It's not dangerous, okay? But a lot of times people have strange things that happen, like, their face keeps getting red, or there's very odd symptoms in certain circumstances. And, if your face is red, you're dealing with Mars, usually. You're actually feeling there's some unconscious level of aggression going on in your environment. Would you agree, Rachel?
Absolutely, yes. I mean, I work with a lot of medical intuition in my practice, and like you, have that empathic ability, and usually Mars does, especially if we're talking about Mars in the first house, or or some kind of transit to Mars, that can very often be a rash, or be rosacea, or things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. So you have, so it can be the rosacea, but what then we can make an equivalence between an aspect or a transit. But then what do we do with that? What's the next level with that? And that's what I'm interested in, is how the symptom opens something up. And very weirdly, is a few days ago, I got a book from a friend of mine, a French friend named Luc Biget. And this is his third volume of a book on the symbolism of the body. And he's French, so he is using a lot of phrases, okay, that are French that might not work for an English speaker. But for example, in French, you don't say, I have a pain in my butt. Right.
Right.
Right. You
Yes.
wouldn't say that. But
No.
in America, you do. And we have a body,
No.
we have some body expression, and there are many of these, right? And I'm also trained in hypnosis. So part of this is the way that language, the way we speak when we don't have words for something.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So I think going through the body is incredible. And of course, there's a whole form of therapy, somatic therapy,
Right.
that actually goes back to the body. And so in a way, I'm looking at the way these things work with the chart.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say you're breaking out in a rash a lot. Okay, I'm clearly going to look at Mars. And if Mars isn't activated, I'm going to see what else might be linked to that symptom, because it could be the moon as well. Let's say getting a Uranus transit, being completely feeling undefended or unprotected.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
Absolutely, because your skin is the first line of defense. So
right.
what I think is fascinating about your approach to this is the way that you're basically using the language that we use about our body and about
Mm-hmm.
our symptoms, and also looking at the astrology, how the astrology helps to contextualize the
Mm-hmm.
experience of the body and gives us another language of symbols to use in healing the body
Yeah.
ultimately.
That's right. Without this being, again, I'm not talking about disease per se. I'm talking about symptom, which is different, because some people they don't have a lot of symptoms. Some people have multiple symptoms that appear on every week. There's something new, and most people are somewhere in between those extremes. So if you sometimes there's something that represents a lifelong pattern. But I've actually done work with clients where I've seen things in a session, the symptom has disappeared. Right. And again, I'm not talking about a serious illness. I'm talking about where it is we have something that's bothering us.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Or getting in the way of our full functioning. Right.
Yeah.
Mm.
So are you looking at progressions? Are you looking at transits? Or for some of these symptoms that aren't those lifelong conditions?
Probably I tend to look at transits of the moment a symptom begins. And well, in France, there was a very strong tradition, for example, of looking at wordplay, double meaning in language. So I'll give you an example of that. The word for knee in French is genou. And in French, you can take the genou and you could say je, nous, which means I and we. Now, you would never do that in English. But if you were working with a French person, you might link those two things and say that if there's a knee problem, it can have to do with the I and us. Mm. Right? Maybe this is a little too abstract, but in English, can you think of an example that you would do that with?
Well, I think that's a good question. um, uh, I mean, I think that there are. I mean, I want to go back to that, like the face, like the expression of like red in the face,
Yeah,
and and the idea of facing something or afraid to face something, needing
right,
a barrier of protection to face something. So,
right.
just as a that's
Red in
the
the
person that.
face could be humiliated,
Mhm, mhm,
embarrassed, right?
yep, yep. Or it
Mhm.
could be anger, like hot with anger.
Mm.
So,
Right. So as you talk to the person, you might, if you're red in the face, um, or you're caught red-handed,
yeah, yeah,
it's just like
exactly.
another part of the body, you
Uh-huh.
might, again, it wouldn't be the same thing. So it's partly playing, it's a form of play that we all know how to do with the planets,
Hmm.
but we're just adding a whole other dimension with it. But in order to do it, you have to have an idea of how the body functions.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah,
And those subconscious links between,
right.
because the subconscious is kind of runs the show. It
Mhm.
regulates our heartbeat. It like it fires up the nerves or the hormones or the
Right.
adrenaline that we need. So I think knowing those connections is another piece of that too. Um,
Yeah. I think so I think these these things in particular, I mean, sometimes symptoms are really obvious. And just because you know what they mean, it doesn't mean that knowing what they mean will make them go away necessarily. Okay. Sometimes it's but it you can elaborate something, I think.
mhm.
And I find it deepens the work that I do with people. So it's a way to get people to, I think a lot of people find medical astrology very complicated. Um, and it's a real art. People used to go to university to study it if they were going to become a doctor. So it is complex. It is complicated. It does implicitly speak about some understanding of how the signs function within the body. So if you have Aquarius, for example, where we just had a huge pileup of
Yeah,
planets in Aquarius, right?
right,
And
right,
we can see it in the world where people's water stopped flowing in Texas because
right.
the pipes burst.
Yeah, exactly.
Because Aquarius has to do with the circulatory energy. So
Mm-hmm.
there was a lack of energy circulating in the body politic.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a circulatory problem in the body, it has to do with how things are moving between you and the outside world. Like, is energy too far out and doesn't come back to you? So, or is it too inward and doesn't get out enough? So we're looking at stagnation sometimes with Saturn transiting Aquarius,
Mm-hmm.
right? And weirdly enough, uh, I noticed when Uranus entered Taurus, there were a lot of physical symptoms that suddenly emerged. And they weren't necessarily what I would have expected, but I think I'll talk about that on Saturday. So
Okay, yeah, okay, so that'll
as
be
part of
now
my talk.
now everyone's going to want to listen. What symptoms were they? um, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. Um, so I love that idea of 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 offering, like, as having a new language to relate to the body. So that way
sure.
people aren't fearing their symptoms or or wrestling with whatever condition that is. It's actually like using your body to gain a little bit
Sure.
more self-awareness and using those things that are
Yeah.
up in your body. So I really I appreciate the way that you tie that in, so that you're looking
Mm,
at it in a whole systems way. So you're looking at it astrologically. You're also looking at this from an energetic and healing place,
that's right.
and from an archetypal and psychological perspective too. Um, do you have any stories of times when you've used this approach with clients that have been kind of enlightening for them or that have helped them in some way?
Yeah, I think so. And uh, I have talked to people about symptoms they have. Actually, I had a client who had laparoscopic surgery yesterday, but who had, before we did the session, she uh, was anxious about something, so she rescheduled her surgery. She made a decision about her approach to health, first of all. So then because she'd already made a decision, she wasn't calling the astrologer to say, I'm not sure what to do, or I don't know. Not that what I say is going to be what she does in any case, but it's a different point in the consultation. So we could talk about what was happening. She had a blockage in her body that needed to be removed. And she, by chance had the wonderful Jupiter-Mercury conjunction the day of her surgery, right? I mean,
that's great. Did you elect a chart for that surgery?
No, complete chance.
Wow. Wow.
So this is just someone was aligned with what needed to happen.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. And but we could talk about getting unblocked.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And one of the things I've come to see is that obviously it's always great when you don't have to have recourse to a heavy medical intervention, but when you do, you can say, well, let's hope the people who do this are the best possible people, and that what happens will remove a blockage that has kept something from flowing in my life.
That's beautiful. And I love the symbolism too, with Mercury very often related to the tubes in our body,
Right.
and the passage of things,
Yes.
of all kinds of things, fluids and otherwise. And then Jupiter being, that energy of expansion and opening.
But also the whole idea of meeting the person with good counsel, who knows how to work with you in the right way.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah,
because that's another piece of it.
Yeah, it's so. I mean, I think this is one thing I love about astrology is just the way that it helps you unpack all of these layers of meaning of everything that's going on in your physical body, in your life, and how those things relate to what's happening in the world. So, so I think this is go ahead.
Oh, it's a good, I also think symptoms can be run in families.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes people say, oh, well, I inherited this from my father, or I had this. So we have clues also about where things come from. I always have, I don't anymore, but when I was young, I had cold hands and feet. And it's no longer the case, but that would be something really common for me. Right in English, when we say you have cold feet.
Yes. A fear of moving forward.
For example.
Some of us have those on our wedding day.
You had cold feet on your wedding day?
No, I didn't. Actually, it was wonderful.
No. But so again, not every symptom is exactly that. I mean, you shouldn't be too literal about those things, but we know that the feet are Pisces.
Yes.
Right. So we're going to look and see, okay, where does Pisces fall in my chart or fall in my client's chart? And what does that say? Okay, so let's say Pisces is on the 8th house. Or let's say Pisces is on the 11th house. Okay, it's going to indicate an area, okay, where this symptom is maybe much more active. Right? So we don't just look at the sign and the symptom. It can be quite involved, in fact. right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Mm.
And so by looking at the astrology, then you can open a dialogue to
Yeah,
help you to navigate those.
that's right. Like, so let's say, for example, you have Pisces on the seventh house cusp and you have cold feet. Well, obviously, obviously, I think that one is easy for everybody to
Yeah.
step into.
Yeah.
What is it that you might have be moving back and forth about? What is it you might not be wholehearted with in relationship? And what are you telling yourself about your confidence or your faith in the other? Right. So the symptom will give me a place to dialogue.
Mhm. Yeah. And then perhaps even work on healing intergenerational trauma or intergenerational patterns.
Absolutely, and absolutely. And I have another colleague in France who had a, a heart trauma when he was 48 or 49. You know, he had to be helicoptered off a mountain, and he had an out of body experience. And after that, I mean, he'd been an astrologer for many years. After that, he became really interested in symptoms and family heredity and all of those things. And it became a major part of his work for the next 20 years. And so, you know, the symptom can also redirect you in a way. An experience that's very deeply felt in the body can actually change your direction. So.
Mhm. It's beautiful. Well, I don't want to take any more of your time. I think this you've given everyone listening so much food for thought, and hopefully you'll have many of us coming to hear your talk next weekend.
Well, I hope so. That'll be
Yeah,
great.
yeah.
Right.
And I'll put a link to the conference on this YouTube page, and also a link to your site as well.
Oh, it's lynnbellastrology.com. And you have to, if you look on your phone, for example, you don't immediately see events. You have to go into the little lines at the top to find what's coming up. But there's a lot of recordings and different things. And every once in a while, I write something for my website. I'm not very regular, but.
Great,
And there's contact information, so people can find me there.
great. Well, I really look forward to seeing you next week. And
Yeah,
thanks so much for being a part of this conference, and for having this conversation with me today.
you're welcome, Rach. I'm sure it'll be wonderful.